Hello, Algebra 2 Trig class. This is the video for the second part of the notes for section 5.3. In the first part, we talked about just factoring. How you factor quadratics, how you factor just expressions. It was nothing more than just factoring. So this part has to do with using the factoring to solve equations. Now, we have talked about solving quadratics before, and that's this first example up here in the upper left. All right, the thing is, it was just the 1x squared term. All right, that's all we talked about with solving. So you'd get that x squared term by itself by subtracting 5 in this problem and then taking the square root of both sides. And you got your two answers. X equals, it's not 2, positive or negative 5, but you got your two answers. Okay? Again, there was only one x squared term. This equation here, the x squared minus 7x equals 30, we can't do the same steps. Right? We have an x squared term and an x term. Because of that extra x term, it completely changes what we have to do. So what we're going to do is use the factoring. But now we're solving, okay? So when you're solving quadratics, there's lots of different ways to say it, but they all mean do the same thing. So find the zeros, find the solutions to, find the x-intercepts. Okay, all those things mean the same thing. And the reason for that is, basically, here's a quadratic. The zeros, that's a term which means just it's an x value that makes the function equal 0. All right, it's also the x-intercept, it's where the graph is crossing the x-axis. If this is the x-axis and the y-axis is here, at each of those points, you got a y-coordinate equal to 0. All right, a function is the y-coordinate. So we're finding the x value that makes the function equal 0. So again, just different names of or ways to say it, but you're always doing the same thing. Solve for x. All right, so when you have, actually let's go back for a second. When you have an x squared term and an x term, what you have to do, there's really no other way to do it. There's quadratic formula, but let's not talk about that yet. What you have to do is set the equation equal to 0. X squared minus 7x, we just subtracted 30 from both sides. This is the biggest thing. You have to set that thing equal to 0. Set your equation equal to 0. You only have to do this when you have the x squared term and an x term. I can't emphasize that enough. All right, so we are going to be using factoring. This zero product property, this is what we're going to be doing. All right, the idea of it is 5 times 0 is 0. Negative 3 times 0 is 0. 0 times any number is always 0. All right, the key part is this stuff. Everything is equal to 0. When you have things equal to 0, and you're talking about factors, things multiplied together and getting an answer of 0, you got to have 0 somewhere in there as one of the factors. Okay, there's no way you're going to multiply two numbers together and get an answer of 0 unless one of them are 0. So this is what we're doing. We're setting our functions equal to 0 so that when we factor them, we have a quantity, x, times another quantity, y, to get 0. That means either the x in this one has to be 0 or the y has to be 0. All right? And that's what the zero product property says. If you have two things that multiply together to give you 0, p times q equals 0, then either p is going to equal 0 or q is going to equal 0. P and q were the factors. They were the things multiplied together. All right, so let's look at this first example. 2x squared plus 8x equals 0. You look at these two factors, and again, it has to be set equal to 0. So we already have that. We don't have to do any work for it, but it's set equal to 0. You look at these two terms, there is a common factor of 2x. So you factor that out, you are left with x plus 4 equal to 0. All right, so we have factors. I'm going to put parentheses around this 2x just to emphasize it. But we have our factors. 2x is a factor multiplied by x plus 4. That is a factor. Because we're multiplying these two quantities together and getting an answer of 0, that means either the 2x equals 0 or the x plus 4 equaled 0. And so we just solve each of these things. X equals 0, x equals -4. There's our answers. Okay? When we have the x squared term and an x term, you have to set the functions equal to 0, and then you factor. When you factor, you set each of your factors equal to 0, like we did with the 2x equals 0 and the x plus 4 equals 0. All right, so now let's look at this next example here. We have an x squared term, we have an x term, but it's not equal to 0. So we got to change that. X squared plus 4x, we're just going to subtract the 21 from both sides. So now we're going to factor this. We're going to get an x and an x. We're going to have plus 7 minus 3 equals 0. That's our factoring for this trinomial. We have everything equal to 0, so we set our factors equal to 0, which is the x plus 7. That's equal to 0. We got x minus 3 equals 0. And we solve for x for each one of these. X equals a -7, x equals a positive 3. All right, that's our two answers. Now, again, the idea of this, those names, these are the zeros. -7 and 3 are the zeros. They're also the x-intercepts. If we look at this quadratic, x squared plus 4x minus 21, it's a parabola. It opens upwards because it's a positive x squared. We're crossing the x-axis at -7 and at positive 3. So a parabola is going to be somewhere, somewhere like that. Okay, this is the idea of solving quadratics. And again, you only have to do this factoring when you have the x squared term and an x term. All right, that is the end of the notes. I hope you have a good Friday and a good weekend. I'll see everybody on Monday. Bye.